Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/prorevenge. So sit back, relax and enjoy some Reddit stories. Supervisor belittles me. I make him suffer. For those of you who don't know about my old job from my I don't work here story, I got a job back when I was about 19 or 20 years old at my town's public hospital in their food service department. I stayed with the place for 3 years, but it has since gone down as one of the worst jobs I ever had for many reasons. Witchy nursing staff, insane hours, overworking me and co-workers, and just overall a very toxic work environment. I went in as a socially awkward girl with no spine for conflict or standing up for myself, and came out a much stronger person because of this place. But there is a particular series of events that led to that. Let me set it up for you. My official title was a food service aide, or aide for short. My job I was hired for was to collect dirty trays and dishes from carts on their respective floors, wash all of the dishes that came into my dish room, and put them into the dish machine to be sanitized, before I let the dishes dry and store them where they needed to go. Then, at the end of the night, I would break down the machine and clean the filters of leftover food, and drain the water tanks of dirty soap water before going home. Over time, I became well acquainted with the dish machines we had. First one was 20 plus years old and finally died on us. Rip Big Bertha. And I could troubleshoot a problem with it since I like machines enough to learn as much as I can about them. My boss took notice of this, and how hard I worked in the dish room every day. So, he began to have me learn about the other parts of the department so I could fill in whenever someone called in. Cooking on the grill and serving food in the cafeteria. Cashiering, helping to prepare food trays for patients, learning about different diets and their orders from the doctors, restocking floors for patient snacks and drinks, and finally delivering food to patient rooms. If that seems like a lot for one person, it was. Due to staff cutbacks, we were short a lot of manpower, so a couple of us had to learn as much as possible to keep us afloat. Now onto the story. I had already been working in this small hospital for just over a year at the time, and I was determined to stay at least a few years to help make my work history look pretty good in the stance of longevity. That and pure stubbornness, I guess. In that time, my boss hired a new supervisor for our department, who will now be called Chad. At first, Chad seemed like a pretty nice guy, and me, being the awkward dork I am, tried to help him fit in with the others at work. I told jokes to him, got him to open up a bit to the others, and soon he was able to have a conversation rather easily. All was good. Then, he passed his 3-month probation period, and was no longer being constantly watched by boss. Chad turned into an insufferable jerk. He began to bark orders as if he owned the kitchen, demanding to know why certain things weren't being done his way, and overall was slowing down production tremendously for everyone. Not to mention, he himself was a lazy douche. When there would normally be 2 people washing dishes, if one of them called in, it would mean whoever was there had to pick up the slack and do it all by themselves. Chad wouldn't lift a finger to help, unless he knew boss was going to be in the kitchen and not in his office by HR. And even then, Chad didn't know what he was doing. And to top it all off, he made a point to take jabs at me in front of the others, trying to make me look stupid because I was the youngest member of the department. It felt like I had gone back to high school, being the quiet nerdy girl who was picked on for liking things out of the norm, and being laughed at for being weird. I like to draw, love anime, and play video games. So when the topic of, "What are you gonna do on your days off?" came up, I usually said something like, "I'm gonna relax at home and play video games after doing some chores." Then Chad would make a remark like, "Wow, you play video games? You must not have a life." Jerk. It got to the point where I was so fed up with Chad's BS that I began to grow a bit of backbone. I was fed up with constantly having anxiety working with him, and hiding in the bathroom sobbing during my shift when he was making my life a living hell. I began to make cracks back at him and get into yelling matches with him in the kitchen. No sound escaped the doors once they were closed, so no one outside the department heard us. He couldn't fire me, only tell my boss and sign a write-up, which he never did because he saw it as a way of losing to me in our arguments. Anytime he made jokes at me, I threw them right back, and when I knew he was doing something wrong, I would fight back and tell him how it was supposed to be done. This went on for a few months, and then the final straw. As a dishwasher, you're supposed to take temperatures in the dish machine to ensure it's working properly. It's supposed to reach a certain temperature when washing dishes to ensure everything is being sanitized properly. If not, there could be an outbreak in the hospital from germs or mold. All the temperatures and times were recorded on a sheet and placed in a folder in the dietitian's office by the dish room. I was making my usual rounds of taking temps when I noticed the machine was reading about 20 degrees in the red cooler than where it was supposed to be. I shut down the machine and began to drain the water tanks. This was my way of troubleshooting if the tanks had just not been drained in a while or if something was seriously wrong with the machine. As I was draining the water, Chad comes in and sees me doing this. He was furious and begins to rant. "What are you doing? We still have piles of dishes to wash." Temps were low. Gotta drain the water to see if this fixes it. I think, "How the hell is that going to fix it? You're just wasting time." Me, visibly annoyed, "If you'd let me finish, I'm seeing if morning shift drained the water or not. If not, then it will only take 10 minutes to fill the tanks back up." "I know the tanks were drained. I drained them myself." I get up and look him in the eye, knowing he was lying since he always asked me to take care of the machine at closing. "Prove it. Show me how." He was about to yell again when my coworker Dean in the diet office peers into the dish room. Chad's face turns red and he gives me the death glare before storming off. I continue to work on the machine, and once the tanks refilled, I initialed all of my temps and times on the sheet before returning it back into the office. The day goes by, and after a hellish time on the floors serving patients, I was in the middle of my cleaning duties with the cook and Dean. I get called by Chad, saying that the boss wanted to talk to us. So, after making sure the dish machine was cleaned, I walked with him to the boss's office. There, boss begins to tell me that Chad had given him evidence that I was slacking on my duties, and that I was not taking temperatures like I was supposed to for the dish machine. He said that thankfully, Chad took the temps, but if I wanted to keep from getting into trouble, and to keep the department from getting into legal trouble, I needed to step up and be a team player. He said that I was getting a verbal warning, but if I did this again, I would receive a write-up or possible suspension. My jaw hits the floor, and even though Chad is smiling smugly in the corner, I chose not to argue with my boss and head back to the department, defeated and fighting back tears. I was sure that I took the temps, and when I checked the bug, I was shocked to see what I found. My temps were still in there, and times I took them, but the idiot actually photocopied the page, whited out my initials, and replaced them with his initials. He then traced over the pre-existing handwriting to make it look legit, with his initials. He made it look like I had not taken the temps all day during my shift. I racked my brain, wondering how the heck he could have gotten away with it with no one noticing him. And then it hit me. He must have done it in the diet office when no one was around, due to dinner trays being made under the dietitian's supervision. I was ticked, and I began to bide my time for an opportunity for revenge. It came about a month later. Now, since we are a hospital in a small town, it was normal for us to get catering orders for the members of HR and upper management for when they had meetings upstairs. Those orders were easy, because usually they wanted chips, pre-made sandwiches and soda for about 10 to 15 people. However, we occasionally got huge catering orders for district meetings. And that was when we would bust out the catering dishes. Large white immaculate plates, silverware, glass cups, punch bowl, food serving plates, desserts, tea, and cloth napkins were usually used for these events. And even though it was a lot more dishes for the understaffed aides, it was pretty simple. This particular order was for the CEO, his workers, HR, doctors, head nurses, and the higher-ups who owned the hospital's contract. The estimated amount to be served was about 150 people, since many members of the board were going to show up as well. Usually, we got the huge orders a week in advance, so the supervisor can arrange the schedule to have more bodies on deck to help. Chad, of course, schedules only me to be the afternoon dishwasher, meaning I had to clean the dishes for the entire hospital, and the catering order. This was my chance for revenge. As always, Chad didn't lift a finger to help me in the dish room, and the entire room was completely full of dirty dish carts from the floors. The hospital had about 95 patients that were eating, and morning shift had been running behind, so I had both breakfast and lunch dishes to clean. It wouldn't have been so bad if we didn't have to take apart the trays one by one to make sure no needles or blood were on the trays, and clean each piece. I was stressed beyond belief, because I knew that the 150 people catering order would be due any time now. But I kept myself calm and tried to keep doing my job. A few hours go by, and Chad calls out to me to shut off the dish machine, because it was very loud, and tells me to go and pick up the catering order. Instead of arguing with him, I decided to do it, and asked if he was going to help me. He gives me a smug grin, and tells me, "I have better things to do, you can do it alone." Perfect. So, despite me being exhausted, sweaty, and have a wet uniform from my dishwasher apron with holes in it, I made my way to the management floor. I scope out the damage, and I realize I'm going to have to make 2 or more trips across the hospital to clean this up. I begin to pick up the dishes in the meeting room, take off the tablecloths, and stack them on one of the 2 long carts. While I'm about to clean up the food serving table, I look over to see the door that led into the HR office was open slightly, and a few women were laughing and commenting on how good the pork roast was at the meeting. I knew they were within earshot of me. It was showtime. In this moment, I was thankful for being clumsy, and having sprained my ankle so much growing up, because it was easier to do this. While I was cleaning up, I deliberately tripped on a chair that was left slightly out and went crashing onto the floor. I sprained my ankle doing this, which was what I was planning, and the glassware I was carrying fell and crashed to the floor. The 2 women in HR heard this and rushed over to see me laying on the floor with shattered glass all around me and a few minor cuts on my arm, and they rush over to help me up. We'll call them Jane and Jill. "Are you okay?" "I'm alright," I say, on the brink of tears. "Are you sure? Here, let's get you into a chair." Thank you, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, please don't tell my boss." They help me up into a chair, and when they check me over to see I'm in tears, they began to ask me questions. "Where's your help?" "It's just me right now. I'm supposed to pick this up and take it back to wash them." "Seriously? All by yourself? Why didn't you get someone to help you?" "We're short a dishwasher today. I'm trying as best I can, but I keep falling more and more behind." At this point, I begin to cry uncontrollably. All of the stress and emotions I had bottled up from the past few months from working with Chad and the department had finally built up so much that I let loose my repressed emotions on these 2 ladies. I told them about the understaffing, the insane amount of overtime I and my coworkers were getting, how I was the only one doing dishes that day, how my supervisor refused to help me, and how much stress I had been in. I wasn't faking any of it. I was just waiting for the right moment to finally break down and tell the right people about all of the negative feelings I had. Needless to say, the two were shocked at my breakdown. Once I calmed down, they told me they wanted to see just how bad things had gotten in the dish room. If it was as bad as I said it was, they would make a case with my boss. So, with their help, they helped me back to the dish room with the cart of dirty dishes, and I held onto a cart while limping down the hall. Once we got to the staff door for my department's dish room, I told them to wait outside while I pushed the carts in. Confused, they comply and hug the wall, waiting to see what happened next. I slipped into the dish room with the carts like nothing happened, and Chad comes in and glares at me. At this point, the room was completely full of dishes, carts, and now 2 catering carts that took up a large amount of space. You could barely walk through the dang place. We then begin our normal yelling match, all while the door was left slightly open behind me. "About time you came back. What took you so long?" I was picking up an order by myself. What did you expect, Chad? "I was expecting you to do your job. Clearly you can't. Look at all these trays." I just picked up and began to work on lunch when you told me to get to the catering. Did you do any of these while I was gone? I gestured to the room. "No, I had my own work to do. You're just too slow." How the heck am I supposed to wash dishes when I'm picking up the catering order? "Not my problem. Do your job or you'll get a write-up." With that, he leaves and I go back to meet with Jane and Jill. Their faces are filled with anger and disgust from what they just listened to, and they reassure me that this was going to stop. Now. We walk together back to the management floor, and as I limp into the boss's office behind them, the 2 ladies begin to go off on him about Chad and what he had been doing. Confused, boss had no idea what they were talking about, and looked at me for an explanation. However, Jill and Jane told him to follow us, and we walked back to the department. At this point, my ankle was throbbing with intense pain, since I sprained it pretty good. When we got to the dish room and opened the door, my boss was appalled at the amount of work that was left for me. And when he heard that there was no second or even third backup dishwasher scheduled, he almost lost it. He called for Chad, and the 4 of us waited in the dietitian's office. While we waited, I told them I didn't want him to lose his job over this, but I wanted him to know how I felt being left with so much work. I really felt this way, but a huge part of me just wanted to see him suffer. When Chad walked in to see me and 3 powerful people with me, his face turns pale, but his normal smug face is replaced with one of fake concern and confusion. Though his act fails, as boss began to demand why he didn't schedule someone to help me. He told boss he had been helping me as much as he could today, but Jane and Jill stop him and repeat what he told me before. Boss is disgusted, and he looks to Chad after discussing the situation some more. "This is what's going to happen. OP hurt herself cleaning up the catering, so she's going home for the day and will be off for 2 days. She can't go home, we're short-staffed. That was your fault, not hers. She's not going to suffer because you screwed up. But... Also, I don't care how much overtime this accrues. You are staying after. What for? Tonight, you're going to be the dishwasher. All by yourself. You're going to wash every single one of those dishes and the catering order. And since it's almost time for dinner to be served to patients, I guess you will be doing those too. If you leave anything for the morning crew to clean up, and if the department isn't cleaned like it's supposed to, consider yourself fired." Once he said that, I was sent home for the day, and the 3 continued to tear Chad a new one as I limped out the door. When I got back to my car, I was smiling so much that my cheeks were hurting all the way back to my house. Epilogue. After I got back from my 2-day break, I noticed that there were empty slots open on the schedule that said new hire, but no hours. It seemed that after the talk, HR decided to grant us new hiree slots to help us with our understaffing, but the slots were still empty. I also found something that was just the icing on my beautiful revenge cake. I found out from Dean that Chad had to stay until about midnight cleaning the entire load of dishes that he let pile up on me. And the next day, he even helped one person he scheduled for morning dishes to clean up breakfast, since he scheduled himself to work the morning shift. But the cherry on top was that when there were large catering orders, Chad had to set up and then clean up the orders from then on, since he was convinced it could all be done by one person. So, when he was cleaning a large order by himself in the dish room, and I walked by about to get ready to serve dinner to the patient's room, he stops me. He then asks me if I minded staying back to help him, since there was so much of the catering order left to clean up. I smile and said simply, "Not my problem, do your job." Boom. Oh, you just know it's a perfect revenge when right at the end of everything, after everything's been done, you say the same thing to them as they said to you. And it just, yeah, it's just perfect, isn't it? Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.